Buenos días. Antes de dar inicio a este evento, les transmitimos este mensaje de la Comisión Local de Seguridad de la Escuela. En caso de tener que desalojar este recinto, deberemos hacerlo de forma ordenada, conservando siempre la calma. Procederemos de la siguiente manera. Las personas que ocupan las primeras 5 filas deberán hacerlo por la salida de emergencia, ubicada a la derecha de este auditorio. De las filas 6 hacia atrás, lo harán por la puerta de entrada, saldrán de este inmueble y se dirigirán hasta el punto de encuentro que está localizado entre el edificio A de la escuela y el Centro de Investigaciones de Diseño Industrial, CIDI, de la Facultad de Arquitectura. Si alguna persona no puede desplazarse rápidamente, deberá resguardarse junto a las columnas, que son los lugares señalados como las zonas de menor riesgo. Les solicitamos seguir en todo momento las indicaciones de los brigadistas. Gracias por su atención.
Welcome everyone to this second day of the 4th encounter of formal linguistics in Mexico. Our first speaker is Cynthia Montaño-Ramirez, and she will be presenting the status of the patient subject in Garifuna passives. The speaker will have 20 minutes for the presentation, and then we will have 10 minutes for any questions from the audience.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So I'm gonna talk about the status of patient subject in Garifuna passives. Okay, so first we're gonna see what a Garifuna active sentence look like. So we have Hauti Frengi Aba Manzana, Frank ate an apple. We have the verb, subject, and object, as we can see here as a word order. But in the passive version, we have Hawatu Manzana. So what can we, the thing that we can see here is that Hawatu, we have a morphological passive, wa, and we don't have the agent here, Frengi. So Hawatu Manzana without the verb phrase Frengi. And Garifuna passive, what can we say about Garifuna passive? As we have seen, the language presents an BSO word order in the active sentence. Morphological passive is expressed by one, and the agent is not expressed. So subject and object are adjacent because of the word order. This is going to be important for our analysis, and we are gonna develop this in the next minutes. So it is unclear whether the patient is promoted from object to subject based only in the word order. As I was saying, so in the active BSO, here is subject and object like they are next to each other, and we don't have the agent expression there in the passive. So I will argue that there is patient promotion based on agreement and a transitive sentence. So first I'm gonna introduce a little bit about Garifuna. Garifuna is an Arahuacan language. It is spoken in Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, as well as in the United States. We can see here the region where Garifuna is originally spoken. And there is around, and the number of speakers is around 900,000 people, I will say. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about the data. So the data was gathered from October 2021 to April 2022 during our remote elicitation sessions with Frank Palacio here. And he is a Garifuna speaker from Belize, and he's based in Los Angeles. And the data was gathered as a part of the field methods class. So yeah, we were having meetings for about a year, and we all all the meetings was remote. And well, I'm gonna introduce what is patient promotion from the point of view of Spanish. So in 2A, we have Julio pintó esas paredes. Julio painted those walls. This is the active version, and in 2B, we have esas paredes fueron pintadas por Julio. Those walls were painted by Julio. In this case, the first thing that we can see in Spanish, we have an auxiliary to create the passive, fueron pintadas, and also we could have the agent, we can have the agent expressed by a by phrase here, por Julio, or we cannot, or it can be deleted. So this will be one of the main things about the patient promotion in Garifuna in Spanish. And also, so to see the duration in passive voice with a no by phrase, we can see here, esas paredes fueron pintadas. So here, the internal DP moves all the way from its position to the specifier of TP here, esas paredes fueron pintadas. So in this case, we can see clearly the patient movement from the internal DP to the subject position in the specifier of TP. And it's the same here, only just want to show what happened with the by phrase here as a prepositional, prepositional phrase, here adjunct to the little BP. Esas paredes fueron pintadas por Julio, only to see that if there is agent, that will be expressed in that way in the derivation. So let's see what's happened with the patient promotion in Garifuna. As we have seen, we have our sentence, Jauti Frengi aba manzana. Be subject object. Frank ate an apple. And the passive version, Jauatu manzana. Verb subject and without any agent expression here, and our morphological passive wa. And we are going to see the derivation in Garifuna. So first of all, we have to derive the word order in an active sentence. So verb movement, we need the verb movement to derive word order. So we have here the internal DP. The first is going to be the movement of the verb group from here, this big BP to little b, to all the way to the specifier of TP, how here for the verb root, and then to get all the morphological information here. So that will be hauti. And then what's happened here, that will be the DP that stays in situ inside the BP, the external DP, Frengi, as well as aba manzana stays in situ and the internal of the big BP here. And then when passive comes to here, we see we have a little things more. So first we have the verb movement, the same way that we already see it, but also we need another layer to the passive since we have a morphological passive. So from here, from this big BP, how moves to this little BP, but also to get the morphological passive wa, then we need this other layer to move all the way to the TP. How what to in that case. And since there is no patient movement, the DP, the internal DP stays where it originates. So here inside this big P, manzana. So that will be only movement from the verb as in the active version, but the DP stays here. The internal DP stays where it originates. But then there is another option, passive with patient movement. So, we all have the same movement for the verb and the passive to get the word order. But now what happened? We have the internal DP here, but now we could have this other DP, like the position for the subject, manzana, to have hawatu manzana. The thing here is that since there are BSO word order, it's not very clear if there is movement or not. So that will be only based in word order. So that will be my presentation to argue about the movement from the page to the movement of the patient from the object position to the subject position here. So let's see. First, we have the first argument that will be agreement. And to see agreement, we are gonna see what happened with the alignment system here. So Garifuna presents a split ergativity parent triggered by a tense or aspect, and Garifuna employs pronominal prefixes to index the argument A, agent, subject, argument on the verb, and the pronominal suffix to index object argument or intransitive subject arguments on the verb. And each set is used in a specific tense and aspect, as we are gonna see. So here we have in table 1 the paradigm used in declarative clauses. So we have the prefixes and suffixes here, and Garifuna uses in different ways. So prefixes index the agent argument and the subject argument on the verb in future and other tenses, as we are gonna see in a moment. And suffixes index object argument and intransitive subject argument on the verb imperfective. So far, we have seen only perfective with hawatu manzana, but now we are gonna see in the future how this agreement looks like. So first here, the ergative absolutive in perfective. Then we have hauti, frengi, aba manzana. What's happening here in the active? We have here the agent, frengi, and the agreement is here with the verb in this e. T, that will be the perfective mark, and e that will be the third singular masculine subject, Frank, and hauti, frengi, aba manzana, Frank ate an apple. So now here in the passive version, hawatu manzana, then manzana is, we can see right away that there is a change here in the mark. So manzana, it's a feminine noun, and here hawatu, once that we have the passive, the morpheme passive here, it's agreeing with manzana with as a third singular feminine. So the apple was eaten. Here we can see this strategy of agreement in imperfective, ergative and ergative absolutive. But in future, we have another type, which is that will be agreement in nominative accusative. So we have leigiba frengi aba manzana. Frank will eat an apple. Will eat an apple. So we have first the prefix in the third singular masculine, and then the verb group egi and the morpheme, the future morpheme ba. So leigaba frengi aba manzana. As we can see here, frengi is marked here as a prefix, as a third singular masculine. So that will be the agent, the subject agent. Frank will eat an apple. On the other hand, in the passive version, we will have teigu guava manzana. The apple will be eaten. In this case, we can see the morpheme wa here, the passive morpheme wa, but also the future morpheme here, and manzana agreeing here as a prefix, as a third singular feminine. So teigu guava manzana. So here we can see again the agreement and a different way to see agreement depending on the tense and in a different alignment systems here. And another argument that will be subject that will the transitives. That will be my second argument for the subject status. So first we can say that in the ditransitives, the theme can be passivized, but the recipient cannot. Indirect object is expressed by the oblique dative un, and the indirect object has a very fixed position at the end of the sentence. So that will be one of our main clues here for see what's happened with movement. So in the active ditransitive sentence, we have in 5a, Rubu muti gabayu nu, that will be you gave me the horse. We can see here the verb root at the beginning, give, the whole morphological information here, and also a second mark here. We are going to see in a minute. And then gabayu, that will be the theme, and nu, that will be the recipient here. So you gave me the horse. Horse here, that will be the recipient, and we can see here the mark as a sorry, you can see here gabayu, horse, here as the third singular masculine, and here bumuti, I mean B, that will be for nu, that will be to me. You gave me the horse, so now we have here bumuti. So marking here for the recipient and here for the theme. On the other hand, if we change the places, something like rubumuti nu gabayu, you gave me the horse, then you can see that there is ungrammatical here. So nu, that will be fixed at the end. In the active, the transitive sentence, but also we are going to see what happened in the passive, the transitive sentence. As we expected, here we have ruwati, another form of including the morphological passive here, wa, and the marcation then, once that we have the horse was given to me, ruwuti gabayu nu, we have the theme and the recipient here, but now what's happened? Since now we have another, now that we have the morphological passive wa, then gabayu, the gabayu is marked here in the verb root, ruwati. Yeah, thanks. And then the horse was given to me. Here, that will be the passivization of theme, gabayu. But then ruwadina gabayu, if we would want to try to passivize the recipient here, something like I was giving the horse, ruwadina with this another suffix, then it cannot be passivized. That will be ungrammatical here. And in C, we have now the switch places and the active sentence, ruwati nu gabayu. So it's the same as in 6A, only the order change, but in this case, this will be ungrammatical. So when we try to derive the passive version of the transitive sentence, I will argue for movement because, well, first we have the same movement for the verb here, ruwati, to have as a specifier of TP here, but then now that we have two arguments, the recipient here, the first singular dative nu, we have it here as an internal, since it's also an argument. But we have this as a specifier of the big BP here, gabayu. But then this highest DP, the theme, moves all the way to the specifier of this passive phrase to agree with the subject of the features here. And since this is the closer DP to the verb, that will be that has like the access to get all the features here, the 5 features, and not the recipient here who stays in situ, as we have seen when we try to switch places between one and another. So yeah, that will be my another proof to argue for movement. And well, I have here another test. However, it's not so more concluent about the status of the Garifuna, of the patient Garifuna. So just because of the time, I'm gonna jump to the conclusions here. So my conclusions, that will be that in light of agreement, Garifuna presents a split ergativity parent triggered by tense or aspect, and imperfective passive suffix, imperfective passives, suffixes, index object, and intransitive subject on the verb root. And in future passives, prefix index the arguments A, agent, and S subject on the verb root. And the transitives, in the transitives, the other test, the highest DP, the theme, moves to subject position agree with the subject features there. So that will be all. Sereme, thank you. Gracias.
Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes for any questions.
Thank you for that. It's very interesting. So I have several questions, but maybe I'll take this opportunity to ask about the adverbs that you kind of skipped over. And maybe you could just show us those data and say a little bit about what you think it shows.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I was thinking here to using adverbial just to see also the position of adverbial regarding to the passive here. But well, first here in active we have hauti frengi aba manzana, and the adverbial canonical position that will be at the end, loudly frese. Frank eat the apple quickly, and adverbials at the beginning that will be for information structure purposes. So lau la fresi hauti frengi aba manzana. Frank ate an apple quickly. That will be the two possible way of using adverbials here in active. And then when I'm trying to use it as in to move to play with the position of the adverbials here. So not possible for adverbials to appear in between predicate and arguments here. Something like hauti lau li frese frengi aba manzana. That wouldn't be grammatical. Frank eat the apple quickly. So the relevant here is to see where the adverbials comes in. So between verb and subject, then not possible here, and not possible for adverbials to appear between subject and object in transitive sentence. So hauti frengi lau li frese aba manzana, also not. That wouldn't be possible. So the thing when it comes to impassives here, that will be for the word order to see if something like what happened with the transitive, maybe switch the positions, could tell us something about what happened here. So I was trying to do that, to see how ate manzana lau li frese, that will be that the suspected how ate manzana here, but then this exactly is not so helpful, because since we in Garifuna we don't have the agent expressed here, so at the end it's not so much information about changing the position. So in this case, lau li frese how ate manzana, I mean, still possible, because at the end or at the beginning it's possible either in passive or active version. But what happened here, the thing between the verb and the argument here, hawa to lau li frese, that will be a grammatical, but it's kind of the same, because at the end manzana will be in the subject position or in the object position, and lau li frese is still ungrammatical, so it doesn't really help. But that will be another interesting way to test about the position.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Well, I'll give other people a chance. Well, I guess I had a question about whether there's any way of expressing the agent at all, and if not, if you've looked at all at the interpretation of these passives, and just how are they generally interpreted? Is it just a completely arbitrary implicit agent, or is there any way of expressing that?
Yeah, I was also trying to use like another for example, if there is impersonal passive or something like this. But well, in Garifuna we don't have impersonal passives, and I would like to see maybe more examples there in other languages, what's happening in related languages here in Garifuna, but at least in personal passives there is no here also in Garifuna. So so the agent is is omitted altogether. So yeah.
Thank you.
Just a quick question regarding the agreement you mentioned in your previous examples. There in that example, that the highest DP, the theme moves to the subject position to agree with the subject features. My question is, are you considering the possibility of long distance agreement? Because that, I don't know if that is, if there's any reason why we should discard that possibility.
You mean for staying in situ, right? To
Yeah,
say there is no
exactly.
movement.
Yeah. If really that's what triggers the movement, or if there's any other, if the passive itself has
Something else too.
a different feature that is triggering the movement. Because as for the subject to agree with the DP agreeing with the subject, we could have the possibility of long distance agreement, but I don't know if there's any specific reason why in this instance you're considering that as the trigger.
Yeah, well, I think I will look more into that, the long distance thing, because here, I was using the 5 features to trigger movement, right? So that will be my my proposal. But yeah, I think that will be I have to look more into that other option to see to say that there is no possible. But yeah, my reason it was to use the 5 features, but in that case, I have to look more into that. Thank you for that observation.
Thanks for your talk. This question relates a little bit to what Teresa has just asked. And maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but do you have any data of what happens when in these ditransitive constructions, the agent is also explicit? So you have an explicit agent, an explicit direct object, and an explicit indirect object.
Do you mean in passive, like an agent?
No, before you passivize it.
Like you mean like a full
Active
like
sentence.
like let me see. But because in that case we have like a oblique dative. You mean like no, how can I say, like maybe not the first person, but another thing, not to not show the oblique dative, or maybe an example to understand better.
John gave the horse to Mary.
Like full
Full,
yeah, okay. Well, not in this in this data here, but we really need we really need like the oblique dative here, but here at the in this presentation I don't have the example of this, but I think I think I will need to also provide here the whole example with the full. Yes, but no, I haven't looked. I haven't looked much into that, the full examples there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Cynthia, for your presentation. We'll now move on to the next one.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Wendy Arbey López Márquez, and she'll be delivering the presentation on the structure of Nuntajiiyi nonDP relative classes. Once again, we will have 20 minutes for the presentation plus 10 minutes for any questions that you may have. I shall give the floor to her.
Thank you. Yeah, so today I'll be talking about the structure of non-DP relative clauses in Nuntajiiyi. And first of all, I'm going to start by giving an overview of the three possible analyses that have been proposed for the construction of relative clauses. These analyses try to explain the connectivity between the head and the gap that is inside the relative clause. The first analysis is the head external analysis. In this analysis, the head stays outside the CP, as you can see in the schema in 1. So as you can see here, the head book is outside the CP. And also we see that inside the CP, the relative operator moves from its base position to the left edge. In this approach, the head NP is connected with the relative operator via coindexation. This first account predicts that the head cannot be reconstructed into the relative clause because it is generated outside. The second analysis is the head raising analysis, which is also called as promotion analysis. In this analysis, the head is generated inside the relative clause. As you can see in the schema in 2. Here, the relative operator is the determiner of the head. In this analysis, there are two movements. First, the relative DP constituent moves and lands in the specifier of CP. And then the second movement happens when the head moves out of that DP and raises to a higher position, which could be the specifier DP position in Keynes analysis, or it could be in the specifier of an NP projection under the analysis of BAT. And you can see the two analyses in 2A and 2B. In this approach, the head and the gap are related via movement. This account predicts that the head can be reconstructed into the relative clause because it is generated inside. And then the third analysis is the matching analysis. In this proposal, there are two heads, one that is generated outside and the other one that is generated inside. So this is like a combination of the head external analysis and the head raising analysis. And as in the head raising analysis, in the matching analysis, the head that is originated inside the CP moves from its base position to the left edge of the CP. In this account, both the head external and the head internal must be interpreted individually. So the goal of this talk is to argue that in Nuntajiiyi, a Mihesoke language, DP relative clauses and not DP relative clauses have different structures. And so I propose that DP relative clauses like 4A are derived by a head raising analysis as illustrated in 4B, and that non-DP relative clauses like 5A are derived by a head external analysis as illustrated in 5B. And so based on the availability of the reconstruction of the head inside the relative CP, I assume that the head of a DP raises to the specifier CP. That's what we see in 4B. We see that the head Henkawa raised from its original position. And then for the non-DP relative clauses, we are going to see later that reconstruction of the head is unavailable inside the relative CP. And so I assume that the head is generated outside the relative CP, as you can see in 5B. But before we dive into the structure of DP relative clauses and non-DP relative clauses, I want to highlight some basic aspects of the language. Nuntajiiyi is a polysynthetic language spoken by 36 people in the south part of Veracruz, Mexico. It's a primary opiate language, exhibits a very flexible word order, and it's an ergative absolutive language with a hierarchical agreement system. The speakers of Nuntajiiyi employed two different strategies to relativize DP relative clauses and non-DP relative clauses. So for example, in the data in 6, we see that when relativization of sopiate and relativization of opiate takes place in the language, we see that the morpheme puk is used to introduce the relative clause. However, in non-DP relative clauses in 7, we see that now this morpheme puk is not used. Instead, we found that the relative clause is introduced by relative pronouns. And we also see that in the relative clause, there is a complementizer right to the right of the double H pronouns. Great. And so the two morphemes that we see in non-DP relative clauses, the relative pronouns and the complementizer iga, also occur in other constructions of the language. And so it's important to see their distribution in order to understand their position in the structure. So the relative pronouns employed in non-DP relative clauses are the same WH expressions that are used to form WH interrogative clauses. And in table 1, I have a list of the WH expressions that are used in non-DP relative clauses and that are also used in WH interrogative clauses. Now, the data in 8 show that WH expressions in content interrogatives followed exactly the same pattern as in non-DP relative clauses. For example, if we compare 7 with 8, we see that the WH expressions appear always at the left edge. Now, the second, well, the morpheme puk that is used in DP relative clauses is a clitic relative pronoun that is only found in DP relative clauses. This clitic can be marked between the first word after the head and the verb inside the relative clause, as you can see in night A, night B, and night C. But it is generally marked on the first word. The grammatical example in night C shows that puk cannot be attached to words that appear after the predicate in the relative clause. The second morpheme, iga, that is found in non-DP relative clauses, is also used in complement clauses, as you can see in 10. So here, this morpheme iga is used as a complementizer, and we see that it occurs in a left peripheral position. Okay, now I'm going to provide some movement properties of Nuntajiiyi DP relative clauses. Okay, here I show the Nuntajiiyi DP relative clauses involve A-bar movement, as they can not only be long distance extracted out of embedded clauses, but they are also sensitive to I-line constraints and exhibit reconstruction effects. Okay, so here I'm using two tests to show movement diagnostics, and these tests are long distance movement and I-line sensitivity. In 11, we see that DP can extract. As we can see, they can be extracted from one embedded clause, or they could be extracted from two embedded clauses, as you can see in 11b. The examples in 12 and 13 show that DP relative clauses are sensitive to I-line constraints. So for example, in 12, we see that if we try to extract an opiate out of a coordinate structure, that's not possible. And then the ungrammatical example in 13 shows something similar, because if we try to relativize an object out of a complex NP, that's also not possible. So the availability of long-distance extraction and the island evidence indicate that relativization of DPs in Nuntajiiyi involve movement. Now I'm gonna use two other tests just to show that that in DP relative clauses there is movement of the head. So the sentence in 14a is an extended reflexive construction. In this extended reflexive construction, we see that the possessor here of the internal argument is bound by the external argument malia. The data in 14b shows that the possessor contained in the relativized DP can reconstruct into the C-command domain of the subject malia to meet the binding requirement. The fact that the possessor here is only C-commanded by the subject malia when it reconstructs suggests that the relativized head must be generated inside the relative clause. And so the relative clause in 14b must be derived via raising. And just to confirm that this type of relative clauses is derived via raising, I'm going to use an extraposition test that was proposed by Halsey and Sauerland. So they propose that extraposition is only available with no raising relatives. They show that English relative clauses cannot be extraposed from the NP with which they are associated when a raising derivation is forced. Halsey and Sauerland argue that this happens because the head remains inside the CP. And so the data in 15 shows that the relative clause cannot be extraposed in Nuntajiiyi DP relative clauses. For example, in 15a, we see that the relative clause cannot be extraposed past the temporal adverb with stigma, the day after tomorrow. And we see something similar in 15b. The relative clause cannot be extraposed past the temporal adverb heute, tomorrow. So the lack of relative clause extraposition in DP relative clauses indicate that raising is forced. This means that the relativized head DP is first merged inside the relative clause and then raises to the specifier of CP. So for example, we see that in 16a, the head hemchimpa raises from its original position to the left edge, and something similar in 16b. So here the head and the relative clause form a constituent. Going. So given the results of the movement test and arguments for base generation of the head inside the relative clause, I argue that there is raising of the head from its base position to the specifier in Nuntajiiyi DP relative clauses as illustrated in 17. So in the schema in 17b, I assume that there are two CPs. The higher CP is the landing site of the head, and the lower CP is occupied by the clitic relative pronoun book. I also assume that there is a null C head in 17. Now I'm going to provide some movement properties of Nuntajiiyi non-DP relative clauses. So I'm going to show that Nuntajiiyi non-DP relative clauses involve A-bar movement as they can long distance move from the original position and are sensitive to island effects. However, the connectivity between the head now and the gap inside the relative clause fails to capture reconstruction effects. So I conclude that it is a relative operator that moves from its base position to the left edge of the relative clause, just as in the head external analysis. And as in DP relative clauses, the data in 18 and 19 shows that the gap inside non-DP relative clauses may be found one or more clauses away from the relativized head. And again, as in DP relative clauses, we see that non-DP relative clauses are sensitive to island, as we can see in 20 and 21. So for example, in 20, we see that it is not possible to extract a non-DP. It's not possible to relativize a non-DP out of a coordinate structure. And something similar happens in 21. It is not possible to relativize a non-DP out of an adjoint. The possibility of long-distance movement and the island evidence point to the fact that there is movement of an element in Nuntajiiyi non-DP relative clauses. But this element is not the head, instead is the relative operator, and that's what I'm going to show with the extended reflexive reconstruction test and with the extraposition test. So on the relativization of non-DPs, the extended reflexive interpretation is lost, as we can see in 22 and 23. And so this suggests that the relativized head was not present within the relative clause first. In 22A and 23A, the extended reflexive interpretation is available. The possessor of the adpositional phrase is bound by the external argument. However, this meaning is not preserved when the adpositional phrase is relativized, as we can see in 20B and 23, in 22B and 23B. So in these cases, the possessor contained in the head AP and the subject NP are not co-referential. This means that it's not possible to reconstruct the possessor of the AP into the C-command domain of the subject inside the relative clause. So the lack of reconstruction effects in non-DP relative clauses predict that relative clause extraposition should be available, according to Halsey and Sorland's analysis. And the data in 24 and 25 confirm that relative clauses can be extraposed from the head in non-DP relative clauses. And so this suggests that non-DP relative clauses are derived by a head external analysis. For example, in 24, the relative clauses can be extraposed past the postposition hoime, puime. We see the same effect in extended reflexives in 25. The relative clauses can be extraposed past the postposition hoime and puime. Great. So given the results of the movement test and the arguments for base generation of the head outside the relative clause, I argue that there is movement of a relative operator from, or a relative pronoun from its base position to the specifier CP in non-DP relative clauses, as we can see in the schema in 26B. In this structure, I assume that IGA is the spell out of C. So to conclude, I have discussed the behavior of DP and non-DP relative clauses in Nuntajiiyi. I have proposed that relative of non-DPs have a different structure from those of DPs. And based on long-distance movement, island sensitivity, and reconstruction effects, I argue that Nuntajiiyi DP relative clauses involve raising of the head from its base position to specifier CP. And again, based on long-distance movement, island sensitivity, and lack of reconstruction effects, I argue that Nuntajiiyi non-DP relative clauses involve relative operator movement, and then the head is generated outside the relative clause. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We now have some minutes for questions.
Thank you. This was really, really interesting. Thanks for your presentation. So I had a question that maybe the data is here that I didn't see, or maybe you have it. If this is really a DP, non-DP distinction, or if it's an argument adjunct distinction. So I'm curious if you looked at relative clause DPs that are adjuncts. So something like, this is the man that I made a cake for, or this is the person that I danced with, or something like that, where you'd have a DP relative clause that's not an argument but an adjunct, and whether it would pattern with the DPs or the non-DPs, which I think all the ones you gave in this handout are adjuncts as far as I could tell, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, you're right. Yes, they are mostly, yes, adjuncts. But I think so I'm telling here that they are non-DPs because I think most of them, I don't know, maybe we can see them, some example of them. Yeah, I think most of them, yes, they have like this mul, which is a postposition. I know, yes, and so yes, they are more like adjuncts in this case.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a problem that they're adjuncts. I guess I'm just curious what would happen if you took a DP that was an adjunct and relativized it. Would it pattern with the other DPs, or would it pattern with the other non-DP relative clauses? I think it would say it might help tease apart two possibilities. One, that it's a DP non-DP distinction, or one that it's an argument adjunct distinction. I think either way it would be a really interesting finding, and you'd have something very interesting to say. But I think that would be another possibility you might want to consider, or at least look at some data to try and discount.
Oh yeah, it's possible. For example, in some cases, like let's see if I have here. I think I don't have an example with time here. But if you relativize, for example, time, sometimes in the relative clause, so I have something like where the head is something like tomorrow, but you could have something like the day. I will come on the day when you. So that's possible.
And
yes.
do you think it would pattern with
with non-DPs, because you need to use the WH pronoun to relativize that. Yes.
Yeah, so that might indicate then that even a DP would pattern with the non-DPs if it is an adjunct.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, that might be an interesting thing to consider, whether there's an argument adjunct distinction here. But yeah, really, really interesting data.
Yeah, thank you for the observation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for this really interesting presentation. And I want to give a little background. And the reason is that there's a Mayan language called Yucatec Maya. It's a language I work on, and I've worked on the same phenomenon. And it has the same DP, non-DP asymmetry descriptively.
Yes.
In the sense that you don't see anything like a WH expression in DP relatives, but you see WH expressions in non-DP relatives. However, for the case of Yucatec, I argued that it's all cases of you have a null operator. There is no head raising analysis, and you simply have it just so happens that it's kind of just a fact of the language that you do not use WH pronouns in DP relative clauses.
But you don't use like for example, in this case, we have this book morpheme, and so in Maya and Yucatec for the...
No, and that's exactly what my question was about, because you don't have anything, and it would be very nice to apply the extraposition diagnostic that you talk about to see how it works. But my question is, what would you say about book? I mean, what is, how can we rule out that it is not something at least similar to a DP relative pronoun, let's say?
Yeah, I think, yeah, actually those part of the DP relative clauses, I think is something that requires more work from my part, because I've been like more working on DPs, but at some time I realized that I need to contrast them. Like I can just focus on one without leaving like the other. But I've been exploring like more this book, and it seems that in Nuntajiiyi sometimes we have some constructions where we don't only use the book, but we also use key that comes from Spanish. And I think we are using it also. So I'm not sure if when they co-occur, because it's possible for them to co-occur key and book when you relativize DP argument. And so, but the thing is that you are gonna have first key and then book. And so I don't know if in this, and then key is also using the language as a complementizer. And so I don't know if when they co-occur, if key is a complementizer, and so book is the relative pronoun maybe. Yes, and so it would be like with the other relative pronouns and iga. It's because so in the past the language didn't have like a complementizer, and iga it was also borrowed from another language, from Nahuatl. And so we didn't have like a complementizer in the past, but now we have incorporated like two complementizers, like iga and then the key. So we only used to have maybe the relative operators. Yeah, but I think, yeah, it's something that still requires more research, maybe. Yeah, more understanding this book. But some, like, yeah, I think now that's a hypothesis that I have.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Our next presentation will be delivered by Norimasa Hayashi and is entitled A New Solution to the Labeling Problem by Form Copy. We will again have 20 minutes for the presentation plus 10 minutes for any questions that may arise.
Okay, thank you. I will propose a new analysis on Japanese scrambling within the Chomsky's recent framework. So I will show first some data. So in 1A shows Japanese canonical word order, basic SOV order. So 太郎がケーキを食べた is of course grammatical. And next, 1B shows that with this canonical word order, the accusative case marker can be dropped. So 太郎がケーキ食べた is also grammatical. Next, Japanese allows free word order by scrambling. So 2A shows a scrambling, 2A shows a scrambling case, and the object is scrambled to sentence initial position. So ケーキを太郎が食べた is also grammatical. However, in contrast to the object with the canonical word order, the scrambled object cannot drop the case particle. So ケーキ太郎が食べた is ungrammatical. So the generalization is that scrambling needs a case particle. Next, I will show some theoretical framework. So in Chomsky's 2013 and 2015 labeling framework, Chomsky argues that projection or labels should be determined by by an independent algorithm. And in his labeling algorithm, minimal search applies to a structure. So in 1A, minimal search applies to the structure, and the first located, oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. The minimal search applies to a structure, and the first located head, in this case X, serves as a label. However, in structure like B, the so-called XBYP structure, when minimal search applies to the structure, it cannot locate a unique head. It finds X and Y simultaneously, and this structure fails to have the unique label. And as it is, this structure without the label cannot be interpreted at the interpretive system, and this structure would be ill-formed. And to label this XBYP structure, Chomsky argues that one item, for example, YP, should move out of the structure. Then minimal search can locate the unique head X, and the remaining head X can serve as a label. And in addition to movement, Chomsky also argues that the shared agreement feature can provide the label. So in this structure like C, X and Y share some agreement features. Then minimal search applies to it, and minimal search finds X and Y simultaneously. And this agreement feature, FF, provides a label. So to sum up, for labeling of an XBYP structure in Chomsky's 2013-2015, either phrase should become a copy by movement, and the landing site of a moved element should show agreement. And with this labeling framework, Japanese scrambling poses a serious problem. So in this structure, the object is scrambled to sentence initial position. However, Japanese does not show agreement in scrambling. So how does this topmost label determined? And next problem concerns a case particle. So as shown in 2A and B, the scrambled object cannot drop the case particle. So what role a case particle plays is another puzzle. So to these puzzles, I will address based on Chomsky's 2021 form copy idea. So Chomsky 2021 dissociates copy from internal merge movement. So in the traditional frameworks, there is an asymmetry between external merge or substitution and internal merge or movement. So external merge just forms the structure, and internal merge forms a structure and creates a copy relation. Of course, external merge doesn't create a copy. So there is an asymmetry between the two types of merge. However, Chomsky 2021 separates a concept of copy from internal merge. And in this framework, copy is not a byproduct of internal merge. And Chomsky suggests a copy relation should be assigned by an independent operation form copy. So by separating notion of copy from internal merge, we can genuinely unify two types of merge, external merge and internal merge. So both types of merge just forms the structure. And when once a copy relation is dissociated from internal merge, nothing prevents a copy relation between two elements that are introduced by external merge. And Chomsky explains the control construction and the parasitic gaps construction. So in 3A, there are two inscriptions of Jean here. And they are introduced by external merge to their seat positions of tried and win, respectively. So there is no movement relation here. However, form copy can assign a copy relation between them, and John tried to win is derived. And this analysis can capture the intuition by Hornstein's 1999 movement theory of control without movement. Another suggestion by form copy is a copy relation between two non-identical elements. So in 3b, Chomsky suggests that there is a copy relation between John and himself. Of course, John and himself are not identical element, are different syntactic objects, but we can assign a copy relation between them. And my analysis is also based on these ideas. So before discussing scrambling case, let's see how form copy works in the labeling framework. So as I have shown before, to label this XPIP structure, one item, for example, YP, should move out of the structure in Chomsky's 2013 and 2015 labeling framework. However, if there is another inscription of Y at a higher position, and if there is a copy relation between the two inscriptions of Y, then the lower Y has a lower the lower inscription has the lower copy status without movement. And when minimal search applies to a structure, it locates X and Y. However, Y is a lower copy, then X can provide the label here. So my proposal is that without movement, an XPYP structure can be labeled if the highest head of a structure receives a lower copy status. So False shows some assumptions here. First, the order of the phase label operations are as follows. First, form copy assigns a copy relation. And next, minimal search gives a structure labels. Next, for B, a nominal with a case particle has a structure of NPK. So this means a case particle acts as an independent head, a KP hypothesis. Finally, for C, case particles are the realizations of case assigners. This assumption is based on Pesetsky and Tregel's serial works. So let's see the derivation of scrambling. First, a nominal is formed by merge of NP and case head. Next, V and T, subject and C merge one by one, and the derivation reaches the phase level. And first, form copy applies to V and K, and it makes K a lower copy of V. And at the same time, this K head receives the accusative feature, and it will be externalized as the accusative case marker. Then labeling applies here, and when minimal search applies to this lowest structure, it locates the N head and the K head. However, K head is a lower copy of V, so a nominal can project. Next, this object is scrambled to sentence initial position. And form copy applies to the two inscriptions of the nominals. And the lower copy status of K is also copied to the higher nominal. Finally, minimal search labeling applies to the topmost structure, and minimal search locates K head and C head. However, since K head is a lower copy, then C can project. So this is why Japanese scrambling can solve the XPYP problem without agreement. So what is important here is the lower copy status of the K head. Therefore, without this K head, scrambling structures cannot solve the XPIP problem. So in this structure, a nominal takes an NP structure, not a KP structure without a case particle. Then when this nominal, this object is moved to sentence initial position, minimal search locates N head and C head. However, both are visible to minimal search, and neither of them receives a lower copy status. Then the XPIP problem cannot be solved, and the sentence will be ungrammatical, like to be. So in scrambling, case particle cannot be dropped because of the XPIP problem or labeling problem. However, note that a nominal NP object does not cause an XPIP problem at their theta positions. At their theta position, a nominal merges with the head V. So minimal search can locate the head V first. So there is no XPIP problem here. Therefore, an object can drop the case particle at their base position, like 1B. Okay, so this is my analysis on scrambling. So next, my analysis can be extended to German partial double-H movement, which is another puzzling construction to labeling theory. So in 5A shows normal double-H interrogative in German. So mit-wenn moves to sentence initial position, a criteria position. However, in 5B, mit-wenn stops at the embedded spec of CP. And since the embedded clause is a declarative clause, not an interrogative clause, the position of mit-wenn is not a criteria position. And the scope marker VAS is merged at the criteria position. And there is two issues here. Why can mit-wenn stay at the non-criteria position in 5B? In other words, how can these labels at the embedded clause be determined? Next, how are VAS and mit-wenn connected? And I will address these two problems by Chomsky's form copy. 6 shows some assumptions here. VAS is a double-H expletive which only has the operator part. So double-H operators can be decomposed into operator part, UQ feature, unvalued question feature part, and the restriction part. So foo, it consists of unvalued question feature and person feature, and which consists of UQ feature and sing feature. Next, form copy connects the operator part of partially moved double-H operators and VAS. Finally, the highest feature in double-H operators is the UQ feature. And the last assumption is necessary even for a normal double-H interrogative like 8A, what did you buy? So in this normal double-H interrogative, the minimal search can provide the label QQ agreement label here because minimal search can locate the highest UQ feature on what. So according to this assumption, the double-H operator like mit-wenn has a structure like 9. So this UQ feature, unvalued question feature, is the highest feature of mit-wenn. Then let's see the derivation of German partial double-H movement. First, mit-wenn moves to the spec of embedded CP non-criteria position, but it stops here. And VAS is introduced at the small vista P phase. Next, form copy applies to VAS and a UQ feature on mit-wenn. And the UQ feature on mit-wenn becomes a raw copy of VAS. Then labeling applies here, and C can project at the embedded clause because UQ feature on mit-wenn is a raw copy of VAS. Next, VAS moves to the matrix criteria position, and form copy connects to inscriptions of VAS. And labeling applies here, and the label agreement label is provided. And with these copy relations, UQ feature on midband can take the scope indicated by bus. So let's see the more explicit derivation of the yellow highlighted embedded clause. So first, midband moves to the embedded spec of CP and form copy applies to VAS and UQ on midband. Then minimal search applies here for labeling, and it locates UQ feature and C. However, UQ feature is a lower copy of VAS than CCAM project. That's why German partial double-edge movement construction can solve the XPYP problem at the embedded clause. So let's conclude the discussion. Chomsky's 2021 form copy provides a new way of labeling. Assigning a lower copy status to the highest head of a phrase can solve the XPYP problem without movement. Next, Japanese scrambling structure can be labeled without agreement because the K head becomes a lower copy of a case assigner. Therefore, without this K head, Japanese scrambling is not possible. Finally, German partial double-edge movement, another puzzle of labeling, can be analyzed in the same way of Japanese. And German partial double-edge movement can solve the XPYP problem because of the copy relation between bus and the double-edge operator. Okay, sorry for hurry technical, theoretical talk, but thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We have some minutes for questions.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I have kind of a maybe uninformed question because I am not really familiar with this literature, but I think on one of your analysis slides, you had a tree, if you could go back to that, of when you get scrambling.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. So I guess my question, and once again, this is just about my own ignorance about this framework, but when you get up to the top and you have C, and I understand why K is not a possible label of that top node, but why is N not a possible label?
So minimal search applies to the topmost fashion, and first, because minimal search cannot locate N because this NP is a phrase, not a head. So that's why. But K is a head, so minimal search can stops here because search is minimal. So the minimal search stops when search hits the first head.
I see. Okay. Yeah, so that N that's projected from the NP is not a head. It's a label instead. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, that's very important point. Thank you. So the label is not a head. Label is not a syntactic object. Thank you.
I see. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for your talk. This is really just a very I don't know. It's not that I actually completely convinced of what I'm going to ask you myself, but I think that a lot of people working with assumptions similar to yours might. So, for instance, if I understand correctly, the Japanese object scrambling is a form of topicalization or focus fronting. Is that correct?
No. So it's a very important point. So topicalization. So there is many languages that allow scrambling, but some languages yeah, some languages scrambles object by topicalization or focalization, like Persian. So in Persian, the scrambled object always have the discourse effects, like a topic or a focus. However, in Japanese scrambling, there is no discourse effect in scrambling. And so Japanese has the topicalization construction, the focalization construction differently from scrambling. So scrambling structure is an independent construction in Japanese, different from topicalization and focalization.
Oh, I think that answers my question.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, well, if there aren't any more questions, thank you very much for your talk. We will have around 40 minutes for a coffee break. You will find coffee and cookies in the lobby, and we'll come back at 12 for our last two talks of the day.
Thank you.